Chapter 52 of Barnaby Rudge, A Tale of the Riots of '80. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Mill Nicholson. Barnaby Rudge, A Tale of the Riots of '80 by Charles Dickens. Chapter 52. A mob is usually a creature of very mysterious existence, particularly in a large city. Where it comes from, or whither it goes, few men can tell. Assembling and dispersing with equal suddenness, it is as difficult to follow to its various sources as the sea itself. Nor does the parallel stop here, for the ocean is not more fickle and uncertain, more terrible when roused, more unreasonable, or more cruel. The people who were boisterous at Westminster upon the Friday morning, and were eagerly bent upon the work of devastation in Duke Street and Warwick Street at night, were, in the mass, the same, allowing for the chance accessions of which any crowd is morally sure in a town where there must always be a large number of idle and profligate persons. One and the same mob was at both places. Yet they spread themselves in various directions when they dispersed in the afternoon, made no appointment for reassembling, had no definite purpose or design, and indeed, for anything they knew, were scattered beyond the hope of future union. At the Boot, which, as has been shown, was in a manner the headquarters of the rioters, there were not upon this Friday night a dozen people. Some slept in the stables and outhouses, some in the common room, some 2 or 3 in beds. The rest were in their usual homes or haunts. Perhaps not a score in all lay in the adjacent fields and lanes, and under haystacks, or near the warmth of brick kilns, who had not their accustomed place of rest beneath the open sky. As to the public ways within the town, they had their ordinary nightly occupants, and no others, the usual amount of vice and wretchedness, but no more. The experience of one evening, however, had taught the reckless leaders of disturbance that they had but to show themselves in the streets, to be immediately surrounded by materials which they could only have kept together when their aid was not required, at great risk, expense, and trouble. Once possessed of this secret, they were as confident as if 20,000 men, devoted to their will, had been encamped about them, and assumed a confidence which could not have been surpassed, though that had really been the case. All day Saturday they remained quiet. On Sunday they rather studied how to keep their men within call, and in full hope, than to follow out by any fierce measure their first day's proceedings. "I hope," said Dennis, as with a loud yawn he raised his body from a heap of straw on which he had been sleeping, and supporting his head upon his hand, appealed to Hugh on Sunday morning, "that Muster Gashford allow some rest. Perhaps he'd have us at work again already, eh?" "It's not his way to let matters drop, you may be sure of that," growled Hugh in answer. "I'm in no humour to stir yet, though. I'm as stiff as a dead body, and as full of ugly scratches as if I'd been fighting all day yesterday with wild cats." "You've so much enthusiasm, that's it," said Dennis, looking with great admiration at the uncombed head, matted beard, and torn hands and face of the wild figure before him. "You're such a devil of a fellow. You hurt yourselves 100 times more than you need, because you will be foremost in everything, and will do more than the rest." "For the matter of that," returned Hugh, shaking back his ragged hair, and glancing towards the door of the stable in which they lay, "there's one yonder as good as me. What did I tell you about him? Did I say he was worth a dozen when you doubted him?" Mr Dennis rolled lazily over upon his breast, and resting his chin upon his hand in imitation of the attitude in which Hugh lay, said, as he too looked towards the door, Aye, you knew him, brother, you knew him. But who'd suppose, to look at that chap now, that he could be the man he is? Isn't it a thousand cruel pities, brother, that instead of taking his natural rest, and qualifying himself for further exertions in this here honourable cause, he should be playing at soldiers like a boy? And his cleanliness too," said Mr Dennis, who certainly had no reason to entertain a fellow feeling with anybody who was particular on that score.
What weaknesses he's guilty of, with respect to his cleanliness. At 5 o'clock this morning, there he was at the pump, though anyone would think he had gone through enough, the day before yesterday, to be pretty fast asleep at that time. But no, when I woke for a minute or two, there he was at the pump, and if you'd seen him sticking them peacock's feathers into his hat when he'd done washing, I'm sorry he's such an imperfect character, but the best on us is incomplete in some point of view or another.
The subject of this dialogue, and of these concluding remarks, which were uttered in a tone of philosophical meditation, was, as the reader will have divined, no other than Barnaby, who, with his flag in hand, stood sentry in the little patch of sunlight at the distant door, or walked to and fro outside, singing softly to himself and keeping time to the music of some clear church bells. Whether he stood still, leaning with both hands on the flagstaff, or, bearing it upon his shoulder, paced slowly up and down, the careful arrangement of his poor dress, and his erect and lofty bearing, showed how high a sense he had of the great importance of his trust, and how happy and how proud it made him. To Hugh and his companion, who lay in a dark corner of the gloomy shed, he, and the sunlight, and the peaceful Sabbath sound to which he made response, seemed like a bright picture framed by the door, and set off by the stable's blackness. The whole formed such a contrast to themselves, as they lay wallowing like some obscene animals in their squalor and wickedness on the two heaps of straw, that for a few moments they looked on without speaking, and felt almost ashamed.
"Ah!" said Hugh at length, carrying it off with a laugh. "He's a rare fellow, is Barnaby, and can do more, with less rest, or meat or drink, than any of us. As to his soldiering, I put him on duty there." "Then there was a object in it, and a proper good un too, I'll be sworn," retorted Dennis with a broad grin and an oath of the same quality. "What was it, brother?" "Why, you see," said Hugh, crawling a little nearer to him, "that our noble captain yonder came in yesterday morning rather the worse for liquor, and was, like you and me, ditto last night."
Dennis looked to where Simon Tappertit lay coiled upon a truss of hay, snoring profoundly, and nodded.
"And our noble captain," continued Hugh with another laugh, "our noble captain and I have planned for to-morrow a roaring expedition, with good profit in it." "Again the Papists?" asked Dennis, rubbing his hands. "Ay, against the Papists. Against one of 'em at least, that some of us, and I for one, owe a good heavy grudge to." "Not Muster Gashford's friend that he spoke to us about in my house, eh?" said Dennis, brimful of pleasant expectation. "The same man," said Hugh.
"That's your sort!"
cried Mr Dennis, gaily shaking hands with him.
"That's the kind of game. Let's have revenges and injuries and all that, and we shall get on twice as fast. Now you talk indeed." "The captain," added Hugh, "has thoughts of carrying off a woman in the bustle, and and so have I."
Mr Dennis received this part of the scheme with a wry face, observing that as a general principle he objected to women altogether, as being unsafe and slippery persons, on whom there was no calculating with any certainty, and who were never in the same mind for 24 hours at a stretch. He might have expatiated on this suggestive theme at much greater length, but that it occurred to him to ask what connection existed between the proposed expedition and Barnaby's being posted at the stable door as sentry, to which Hugh cautiously replied in these words:
"Why, the people we mean to visit were friends of his once upon a time, and I know that much of him to feel pretty sure that if he thought we were going to do him any harm, he'd be no friend to our side, but would lend a ready hand to the other. So I've persuaded him, for I know him of old, that Lord George has picked him out to guard this place to-morrow while we're away, and that it's a great honour, and so he's